What's up, guys? It's Toad back with you as usual. 0-1 yesterday with the underdog moneyline hockey play, which I don't think it was a bad play. I mean, like I say, when you're playing that moneyline underdog, you're expecting them to just have a better chance to win than what the odds are giving you. You're not even needing to win like 50% of those. And that one thing I forgot about that game that made it, I think, an even better spot to play Columbus was that was their home opener this year, so it was Johnny Gaudreau night. He was the player who he and his brother were both killed by that drunk driver not too long ago. So it was a big celebration for him. It was a huge emotional game for Columbus. That was another reason why they would step up their game a little bit. I was wrong about Columbus's starting goalie in that game. I can just get to sharing the screen already. Their starting goalie actually wound up being probably an upgrade from the other one. It was, I can't even remember what his name was, but I think it was their better goalie, actually. Merzlikins, I don't know how to pronounce it. Does it sound right? Merzlikins, him. But he's actually a better goalie for Florida, for Columbus. So, and Florida did go with Knight, their worst goalie. So the goaltender situation was actually probably the best matchup that you could possibly get for Columbus between those two teams. And Columbus, I mean, they outshot the Panthers in the game, and they were never trailing until late in the third period. They were not trailing until 2 seconds left in the third period. They actually allowed a goal with 2 seconds left in the second period going into the third period. I mean, that's just brutal, man. If it had stayed tied going into the third period, it might have been a completely different game. Columbus outshot Florida by 16, and it was not because they were losing the game, as I showed you. It was they were winning the game actually twice and never trailed until this ridiculous goal with 2 seconds left in the second period. So what can you do? I thought it was the right play. My leans in hockey went 1-1 in the other two stronger leans. Carolina was right, and Nashville was not right. I don't know what's going on with Nashville there. And you can see why I don't get involved in these midweek college football games, because the two games I thought were going to be high scoring were not. And then the other game wound up going into double OT and was a bit higher scoring. These midweek games, man, you never know what's happening with these. Although I am playing one of them tonight for the first time. I think I actually like a midweek game here. The Ducks still don't have a captain. I'm going to talk about the Ducks in a second, Urjo. I'll talk about those games briefly. I'll talk about the Major League Baseball game first, which I also have a play on. Making two plays today. I'm playing the Mets in the first 5 innings in this one at minus 115. The first 5 inning play on the Mets here, the money line is actually higher than it is on the full game, because I think the odds makers are seeing what I'm seeing, and they kind of realize that the starting pitching matchup is in favor of the Mets, but the rest of the game, maybe not so much. So this is game 3. This is a 1-1 series. Mets won game 2. Both games were kind of actually like blowouts in a way for the winning team. Dodgers blowout in game 1, Mets blowout in game 2. So now we go to New York for the Mets side of this series at Citi Field for game 3. So the teams have traveled cross country. They had yesterday off. So that means the bullpens are going to be rested enough. So that's part of the reason why I'm just going with the starting pitching matchup here, is because the Mets bullpen is not very trustworthy. I think the Dodgers bullpen is better. Probably has been the better one, I think, in the playoffs as well, but was the better one fairly significantly during the regular season as well, I think. And the Dodgers have the better offense as well. So I'm going just with the starting pitching matchup here, which I think is in favor of the Mets, as you'll see in a second here. So let's take a look at this here. My tabs are out of order, man. Unfortunately, yeah, the Yankees won again last night, so yeah, what can you do about that? But as far as this series, the MLB, I don't think they're going to be mad about either of these teams facing the Yankees in the World Series, man. I mean, I think they'd be fine with a Subway Series or with Yankees-Dodgers with Ohtani there, because the Dodgers starting pitching, as I mentioned, is kind of a mess right now, and that's what we're kind of looking at here with Walker Buehler, who's their 30-year-old starter here. Let me widen this slightly, I think, just so I can get the all right. So Walker Buehler, I just hate the really shrunken mobile view there on it, although I don't know if it's even better for screen sharing or not. Walker Buehler, he's 30 years old, and I mean, yeah, he was good in the past. I've talked about him a bunch, but he didn't play at all last year. He kind of struggled in 2022. So the pitcher that he was way back in the day up through 2021 seems to have completely disappeared. And now we're looking at a guy who didn't pitch in the majors last year, had a shortened 2022 season, and now this year, he's just been bad, dude, with a 5.38 ERA, 1.55 whip, only 64 strikeouts in 75 and a third innings pitched, so his strikeout rate was way down. His walks were up a bit at 28, so just not putting up good stats, dude, and it just has not really gotten better for him. I mean, down the stretch, maybe he was a little bit better with a 4.44 ERA in September, 25-10 strikeout walk ratio, and then he had a difficult go of it in his one postseason game this year as well, giving up 6 runs on 7 hits and 1 walk in 5 innings at San Diego, which is a pitching park, although, yes, San Diego does hit pretty well at home. But he had also no strikeouts in that game, so that is kind of a glaring stat line there. And in his last game of the regular season, I mean, maybe San Diego just has his number, but still, he only had 1 strikeout in the prior game against San Diego as well, so I think it's a red flag, man, when you're not putting up strikeout numbers like this. And then up against the Mets, his numbers aren't particularly good. In an 80 at-bat sample size, he's allowed 7 home runs to them, although 4 of them are Pete Alonso. So Pete Alonso really wrecks him, the polar bear, which I don't even understand why they think he looks like a polar bear. That his nickname came from his teammates thinking he looks like a polar bear. I mean, okay, I mean, if you think so, I guess. Maybe they were just high out of their minds or something. But one other way I could see playing this is because Alonso crushes Buehler so badly that if you wanted to play a prop on Alonso, the runs plus hits plus RBIs prop is the hitting prop that I prefer, because if they walk, you still at least have a chance to get that run. They still have a chance to score. So because he crushes Buehler to such a degree, I wouldn't mind playing Pete Alonso over probably like 1.5 runs plus hits plus RBIs in this game as well, if you wanted to. But overall, Buehler is not very good against this Mets team. A 16-5 strikeout walk ratio. He's held them to a 263 average, which doesn't look that bad, but an 893 OPS. And I don't believe he's faced the Mets this year. So you could take that 2 ways, really. One, you could say, well, that means the Mets are not very familiar with him, but they do have 80 at-bats off him. So obviously, I'm tending to lean in the other direction, which is that the fact that Buehler hasn't faced them this year means that Buehler was in way better form when he put up these numbers against the Mets. So all these numbers are back when Buehler was a better pitcher than he is this year. So that could mean that you expect him to be a little bit worse in this one here. So his numbers just overall, I mean, that's a pretty high OPS against the Mets. He's not in good form recently. And looking at his splits on the season, his road numbers are significantly worse than they are at home, with a 6.53 road ERA and 293 batting average allowed, 25-16 strikeout walk ratio. So he's been worse on the road than at home. And I will say, I did look at his numbers specifically at Citi Field. He does have 2 starts in his career. Neither of them were this year, though. So again, they were back when he was a better pitcher, and he did do decently in those. He had like a 2-something ERA in those, but he did also have like an 11-5 strikeout walk ratio, which is too many walks still and doesn't look that good. So Buehler, overall, man, I think he's just struggling, and it doesn't look that good for him. And then on the other side, Severino. So this matchup sets up decently for the Mets because they got the guy who they're rolling out as their number 1 starter, even though he doesn't quite have number 1 starter stuff, but he hasn't been bad. So they're rolling him out up against the Dodgers, like number 3 starter, basically, in this one. So I think the Mets kind of know, like, we better not waste this starting pitching matchup here, man. We better get this done. Severino, 3.91 ERA in the season, 1.24 whip. Not excellent numbers, but obviously better than what Buehler was putting up. He had a 4.08 ERA coming down the stretch in August, but then 3.64 in September. And his strikeout walk ratio was good in both months, 35-8 and 30-8. So he was pitching a lot better than Buehler was, even though Buehler was actually a little bit less bad down the stretch. Buehler was bad in those 2 recent games against San Diego. Severino has been in decent recent form. And if you throw out this game against the Braves, he has not allowed 4 earned runs in any start until going all the way back, to the last start in August where he gave up 4 in a tough matchup at Arizona. So he's been pretty consistent throughout that span. He's made 2 6-inning appearances in the playoffs with a 10-2 strikeout walk ratio. He's allowed too many hits, but he's still kind of kept the runs down, allowing 3 earned runs in each. So not terrible in those 2 starts, both on the road. So not bad either. And looking at his split, Severino. So Buehler is way better at home than on the road. So he's in a worse spot here because he's on the road. Severino has massive splits as well, where he's way better at home with a 5 ERA on the road, 2.96 at home this year with a 231 batting average. So Severino's way better at home. Although granted, yes, Severino's a little bit worse at night, and Buehler is actually a little bit better at night. So, I mean, those splits aren't totally to be ignored, but still, I think the stadium splits matter a little bit more. And the matchup against the specific hitters matters more. And Severino's numbers are better against the Dodgers, maybe surprisingly, because the Dodgers' offense is good. In 98 at-bats, 30-11 strikeout walk ratio. So that's too many walks, but 6 of them are Mookie Betts. So the rest of the team doesn't rack up that many walks against him. Betts is the one guy that hits him really well. And overall, he's held him to a 235 batting average and 740 OPS. So better numbers than what Buehler has in this specific matchup as well. So I think Severino's got the edge there. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go with Severino over Buehler there in the first 5 innings for the Mets there. And, of course, I don't mind the Mets full game either, really, but I like the first 5 inning a little better. Minus 115 was the best I saw out there on that. You can get them minus 105 in the full game, so you can get them at cheaper on the full game, but that's because the odds makers know that the Mets' biggest advantage in this game is with the starting pitching matchup. And I forgot to explicitly call it out, but Buehler's home ERA is still not even that good at 4.60 and a 286 batting average allowed. It's just his numbers are even worse on the road. So I like Severino in that starting pitching matchup there. Although, granted, the market read looks like it's on the Dodgers as they flip from a plus 109 dog to a minus 109 favorite. I think that's going a little too far, man. In a pitching matchup like this, I don't really think Buehler deserves that much respect in the line such that they'd be a favorite on the road, even though the Dodgers are the better team overall. The starting pitching matchup, I would think that the Mets should be a small favorite just because of the starting pitching matchup. But apparently that's not the case. I just think that that's extra value on the Mets because I like the matchup for them. 56% of the tickets, but 74% of the cash on the Dodgers. So maybe the public's just not coming in as much on the Dodgers, maybe just because they see that Buehler's stats are really bad. Buehler. And they prefer the Severino side, actually. Or maybe they're just also reacting to the Mets having won most recently, so they're reacting to what they saw most recently as well. I don't know, because I would expect the public to still come in more on the Dodgers in general. The total's down from 8 juice to the over to 7.5 juice to the over. Very public on the over with 88% of the tickets and 90% of the cash on the over. I think the first game, stayed under by a half run, if I remember correct. Am I wrong about that? No, I think both games went over, right? Because the Dodgers won 9-0 in the first game. Never mind. And then both games went over in this series. So I actually liked the second game over, as I mentioned, more than I like the first game to go over, because that was the Dodgers bullpen game up against Manaea, who didn't have very good numbers against the Dodgers. So both games have gone over so far, so the public is only coming in on overs, especially with a Dodgers-Mets matchup where they know both teams have a bunch of good hitters. So I don't really have that much of a read on the total, but I'm not going to play a public over like this. Let's look at the NHL here. We got 4 games here. I mean, some interesting games here with the scheduling spots here. I'm not playing any of these games, but I looked at Buffalo first, and Buffalo, I looked and I was like, man, they might be in a letdown spot because they finally got their first win, which was at home. They have not played a true road game yet because they played 2 Czech Republic games, and then they started the season at home, and they beat Florida in their most recent game, which actually was, I guess, with their lesser of their 2 goalies in net. They still beat Florida. And now they've had 3 days off, though. So Buffalo is the more rested team here, and they're starting a road trip. So starting a road trip does tend to be a more focused spot. So I tend to think that mitigates, any letdown type of spot. Because they beat the returning champs, Florida. You think that maybe Buffalo would be in a little bit of a letdown spot off of that, but I don't think so because they're starting a road trip against a Pittsburgh team that's been playing pretty decently so far, so I don't really see a letdown here. And Pittsburgh does have less rest here, although they still were off yesterday. They're returning home from a road trip, though, so I don't tend to like teams returning home from road trips either, although this is a short road trip that didn't really take them very far, and it was only 3 games, Detroit, Toronto, and Montreal, so I don't think it's a really bad spot for Pittsburgh either particularly. So not going to play that game, but just kind of interesting to point out the scheduling situation there. Pittsburgh is up from minus 125 to minus 128, but they are a little bit public, 55% of the tickets and only 52% of the cash on that one. So hard to read that game. My Boston Bruins are going out to Colorado, which they're starting a road trip, and I know they're going out to Elevation, which isn't the easiest thing to do, and they're coming off a tough game against Florida, but also it might just serve them well to just get out of there, just get out of home, because they just had kind of a bad game against the Florida team that is down a couple of their star players right now. As I mentioned last night, Kachuk and Barkov, I think, are both still out for Florida, so Bruins maybe should have won that game, but their only losses so far have both been to Florida. So, I mean, take from that what you will. The Bruins just have not played particularly well against Florida so far. Now they get to go out on the road to start a road trip. Tough spot to have to go out to Colorado, but I think that might help the Bruins in a way. Although they are off of, like I said, a tough loss, a pretty big game, a step-up game that they weren't able to win. So I see positives and negatives for the spot for the Bruins. In Colorado, I don't know what is going on with this Colorado team, man. I mean, they're a good team. They were one of the top teams in the Western Conference last year, and they have a lot of returning guys on this team, so I would not expect them to not be good this year. I'd expect them to be pretty good, and they've been lined as a big favorite in these home games like they should be good, but this has been ridiculous, man. They've allowed 20 goals in 3 games so far. I don't know what is going on with this Colorado team. I mean, it's not like goaltending was really their specialty last year necessarily, but this is just ridiculous. So I think at some point, they're probably going to turn it around, and they're staying at home, so I don't know, man. I mean, they've been playing so poorly recently, though, that maybe they're just not as good as we think they are. I don't know. So this game's tough to read as well. I just thought I would point it out. I just don't know how Colorado's been that bad. They're up from minus 115 to minus 116, but they are public. Even though they're 0-3, they're getting 65% of the tickets and only 53% of the cash against a Boston team who's 2-2 right now. So weird that the 0-3 team is getting the public action there. The oddsmakers are actually lining Colorado less than home ice here, so they're actually lining the game like Boston is the better team here, which may be a slight overreaction to Colorado's awful start. I don't know. And then you got Utah and Anaheim. This is a weird one as well. Utah's down from minus 140 to minus 122. So the line has moved against Utah, but 59% of the tickets on Anaheim and 67% of the cash actually on Utah. So it looks like a cash versus ticket split favoring the Utah side, but the line has gone down on Utah, so conflicting indicators there. And my first look at this, I did not like the Utah side in this one, so I'm not going to play this one either. I mean, the market kind of disagrees with my situational read on this one, except for the fact that the line has actually moved in the direction that I agree with. So I don't agree with where the cash percentage is in this one. Utah, I mean, it's kind of a difficult spot for them, in my opinion. They haven't been home since their opening game, so they're playing a 4th straight road game, although granted they've had a day off between each one, but they also just faced their first loss, and I said that was a tough spot for Utah because they were coming off a huge upset win at the New York Rangers, which is also a really tough game. But of course, I mean, this is the Ingram-Vejmelka thing I was talking about with Arizona last year, because this team is still Arizona from last year, so how good could they really be? But remember, they had that stretch where they were winning like every game with Ingram in net and losing every game with Vejmelka in net, and it's happening again already. The Ingram-Vejmelka factor is real, man. So I expect Ingram to be back in net in this one, so maybe that will help Utah a little bit, but still, I think it's a tough spot. I mean, they're continuing a road trip, but this road trip gave them like the New York, New Jersey triangle, and now they have to go one day off. They have to go to the Pacific Coast and play a late game. I mean, that's pretty brutal, man. I mean, they're adjusted to the East Coast time zone now. Now they have to go play a game that's going to end at like 1 a.m. Based on what their biological clock is now adjusted to. That's tough. That is tough, man. And they do have Boston up next when they return home, which is maybe a bigger game than Anaheim, because Anaheim is a team that is possible to overlook. And that New Jersey game, I mean, I understand it was a bad spot for them, a letdown spot, but they didn't do well in that game, and it broke their winning momentum. So sometimes when you suffer that first loss of the season, sometimes that actually kind of hangs you over, and you lose the game twice. So the spot to me doesn't look very good for Utah, to be honest. And Anaheim is staying in the Pacific time zone, and it's Anaheim's home opener, and they've had extra time off. So they have less travel just going from Vegas back to Anaheim, and they haven't left the Pacific time zone yet this year, and they have an extra day off. So that this travel spot looks way better for Anaheim here. They are coming off a tough game, though. I mean, they lost to Vegas, and they do have Colorado up next. So this game is kind of sandwiched in between two bigger games, but it's their home opener, man, and Utah's been playing pretty well recently, so I do lean to the Anaheim Ducks side here. There you go, Urjo, the Ducks, the captainless, rudderless Anaheim Ducks team here. We have no idea how good this Ducks team is. Probably not very good, but they beat San Jose, who's a pretty bad team who they were supposed to beat, and they lost a game they were supposed to lose to Vegas. So everything has kind of just happened the way you would expect. But is Utah good enough that they command such respect that they should be laying a price like this on the road in a tough spot like this? I don't really think so. I mean, I could also see this game going over. Here I go with my total reads in hockey, or I can kind of read where I think games are more of an over situation. Usually it's more of a spot where I think both teams are kind of in bad spots, although Anaheim's rest spot isn't really that bad, but just because it looks a little bit sandwichy, the over might be worth a look here as well. And Anaheim has not played any high-scoring games so far, so I could see maybe that trend not continuing here. The over's got 93% of the cash and 80% of the tickets, so it's a public over, but it's hockey, so the public isn't really playing NHL totals to that much of a degree here. And the line has moved up a little bit with more juice on the over 6 there. So that's the way I read that game. That's maybe the most interesting game at those scheduling spots. Stacks, yeah, the slump is continuing right now. I have not done well recently. What am I at here on the season? I don't even know. I don't have I do not have Action Network up right now so that I can see. But let's go to college football here before I get out of here. I'm talking about every single game on the board except for this. What is this game? Los Angeles, Toronto. What do we? Wait, Los Angeles. What? Oh yeah, LA Kings and Toronto. I'm losing my mind here. I haven't talked about that game, but that was like, I don't know. There was less of like a situational read there for me. So let's look at this college football slate, and then I'll get out here. And I actually have a play in the midweek college football for once, and it's on the second game. First game is actually a decent-looking Conference USA matchup here between Western Kentucky and Sam Houston, who are two of the top teams in Conference USA right now, or at least record-wise they are. Sam Houston has gone up from 2 to 2.5 with juice, but they are public with 72% of tickets, but Western Kentucky has 58% of the cash. I'm kind of surprised that Sam Houston is public because they're newer to FBS, and they really don't have a lot of name recognition around them. You expect Western Kentucky because people have kind of seen them play against some bigger FBS teams, and they've seen them in bowls and stuff. So I'm kind of shocked, actually, that Western Kentucky is not getting the public action. And Western Kentucky is kind of considered to be the better offense out of these two, especially with Veldkamp now as their quarterback. Western Kentucky, they're a good passing attack, man. That's what we know about Western Kentucky. They like to throw the ball, and they started out not that great, but they switched to Veldkamp at quarterback, and they've been a lot better with him. And this Western Kentucky team, I think they played the tougher schedule as well. I mean, they played Alabama, which they got annihilated by Alabama, and that's one of their 2 losses. Maybe the public is literally just saying, oh, Sam Houston's 5-1, and we get to play them at under a field goal here. I don't know. Western Kentucky's 4-2. I mean, yeah, but again, Western Kentucky lost to Alabama, and their other loss was to BC. Both of those games on the road. So the top 2 opponents that they faced, they lost to both of them, even though I know BC didn't have Castellanos in that game, so BC was not at full strength without their quarterback, but still a tough game, tough environment, and Western Kentucky played pretty admirably in that game. And other than that, they've done what they needed to do, man, and they beat Toledo, who's pretty good for a MAC team as well. I mean, the other games are not very impressive, but Western Kentucky, they faced a tougher schedule than Sam Houston at the very least, man. And like I said, since Veldkamp has been in their quarterback, their passing attack has been pretty good. So that's what Western Kentucky likes to do. They throw the ball, but they also can't run the ball, and that's all Sam Houston does. So Sam Houston has looked good as well, but their toughest opponent they faced was UCF, I guess was their toughest opponent. And UCF really did a lot of damage to them, and UCF I believe UCF ran all over them on the ground, but that's something that Western Kentucky can't really do. Western Kentucky doesn't run the ball; they throw the ball all over the place. So Sam Houston may be able to keep Western Kentucky's passing attack in check a little bit. Sam Houston's defense has been fairly decent throughout the season, but it's been against some very bad teams for the most part. So I don't know if we know how good Sam Houston's defense actually is. And then against Texas State, they gave up a lot of points to Texas State, who is one of the best offenses they've faced. So out of the wins, that's obviously their best win against Texas State, who is a pretty good offense there and maybe not as good a defense. And this is like I said, this is a big clash in styles here because Sam Houston runs the ball and they can't throw the ball basically at all. So this is a real conflict in styles here. And I don't think we really can tell what these defenses really are. I think Western Kentucky, because you can kind of throw out the Alabama game, and Alabama really ran on them, and I think BC kind of did as well. But if you take those games out and you look at their opponents that are kind of more in Sam Houston's league there, Western Kentucky's defense actually hasn't been as bad. So I lean to the Western Kentucky, yeah, because they suck. I lean to the Western Kentucky side here. I think they're actually the better team, and the odds makers are telling you something like lining Sam Houston at less than home field. The odds makers are actually telling you Western Kentucky's the better team, and I think Sam Houston may be getting a little bit too much respect here. They have a good ground attack, that's for sure, but other than that, I think we don't really know who this team really is, and I think Western Kentucky, as I said, they've faced a tougher schedule, so I think Western Kentucky is the better team. They're the kind of staple of this conference as well, so a big game like this, I think they're going to show up for it. Both teams are going to show up in this game because it's a battle for predominance or for dominance, I guess, in Conference USA there. It's those two teams, and I think Liberty are the three top teams there in the conference, and Liberty, I think, still hasn't lost a game. So I agree with the cash percentage in this game with the Western Kentucky side for those reasons. The total's up from 55 to 56 with 88% of tickets and 97% of the cash on the over. I can kind of see that. I can see the reasoning behind that because even though Sam Houston does run the ball and they can't throw it, their offense does pretty well with the run. In college, you can see teams that are run-heavy teams actually, especially the service academies, you can see them actually put up good offensive stats just with running the football, and Sam Houston kind of does that. They actually run a really fast-paced offense, even though it's all on the ground. So I could potentially see this going over, especially because these defenses, especially Sam Houston's defense, really hasn't been tested that much. So I could potentially see that, but I could potentially see Western Kentucky actually being able to slow Sam Houston down a little bit as well. So this is tough, actually, because both offenses are kind of one-dimensional as well. So you could maybe see the defenses being able to key on that one dimension. Tough game to read. The game I'm on is the other game, and I think this is a sandwich spot. I'm actually playing one of these midweek games. Sometimes I do. You usually find me on one or two throughout the course of a season, and I'm playing, oh my God, I'm playing this awful winless UTEP team +7 here. I'm going to do it. You might be able to get 7.5 too, actually. Because it looks like it's continuing to go up. And I'm just all right, give me more value in the spot, I guess. Florida International, Florida, Illinois, our boys, FIU, are up from -4.5. To -7 with juice now. And they are massively public. 93% of tickets, 97% of the cash. So, yeah, it does look like there is some cash coming in on the FIU side. But I think this is getting out of control. I have no clue why this line has moved this much. A midweek game like this, even though, yeah, it's prime time, but it's Conference USA. Is the public can't possibly be influencing the line like this. So I just don't get it. I don't understand professionals coming in on this because I don't think Florida International deserves this much respect in a line really against anybody. And I know we're looking at a really bad UTEP team. I am aware of that. UTEP, they haven't won a game yet. I know. They suck, and they have not really been able to figure out who their quarterback is. They had Locklear to start the season. I think McConnell, I thought he was hurt, but I think maybe he actually lost his job at some point in there, and then Locklear got hurt, so McConnell came back in, I think. But now McConnell is hurt. He got hurt in their game against Western Kentucky last week. So now they're going back to Locklear in this game, and I'm not convinced that that's a downgrade because Locklear actually played their two toughest opponents, Nebraska and Liberty, I believe, are their top two opponents. Well, maybe Western Kentucky and Sam Houston. So, I mean, UTEP, they actually have not had an easy schedule, man. Even though, yes, they lost their easiest game to Southern Utah, an FCS team, in overtime. So that doesn't look good either. So there's not really an excuse for losing this game. But UTEP did outgain them. And, I mean, it was a close game, and they lost it. Not really much of an excuse there, but it was... Maybe there is an excuse, actually, because it was sandwiched between Nebraska and Liberty, which are two bigger games, although it was their home opener still. But, I mean, they have not had an easy go of it, man. Aside from that, I mean, Colorado State's not a very good team, and they played okay against them, coming to within 10. And then Sam Houston and Western Kentucky are also top Conference USA teams. So UTEP, they've played 3 games in this conference so far, and all 3 of them are against the top 3 teams in the conference. So UTEP... Yeah, they're 0-6. Yeah, they're bad. Their defense actually is, I think both sides of the ball, they're just terrible. But I think their defense is actually really bad as well. But again, I mean, you can maybe check that a little bit just because their schedule really has not been easy, man. I mean, as far as their conference slate so far, it's been tougher than, it's been like the toughest possible conference slate so far, facing the top 3 teams in the conference. And now they get a little bit of an easier schedule, a little bit of a let up here, starting with this game here. And they are on shorter rest because they played last Thursday, I know. So they only have 5 days off. And FIU played last week at I don't know when they last played, actually. Last Saturday, maybe. So they actually have like 8 days off. But FIU, I mean, what can we say about them? I mean, they're a one-dimensional offense as well. So they have 7 days off. They actually last played on last Tuesday, So both teams played midweek games last week, so FIU does have 2 additional days off, but I'm not sure that it matters that much, man. FIU, yeah, they're a good passing offense with Jenkins there. That's what they do. They throw the ball. They can't really do much of anything else. I mean, their rushing attack basically is non-existent, and I'm not sure what we can really say about their defense, man. I don't know if it's that good because... based on their schedule, it's really hard to read this FIU team, man. They started out the season against Indiana. Fine. I mean, they're going to lose to Indiana. Indiana's good. We know that. So maybe we can kind of throw that out. I mean, so FIU has faced the best single opponent that either of these teams has faced. But after that, this has not been that difficult to schedule, man. Yeah, FIU crushed Central Michigan. So people are going to look at that and think, well, FIU does have one blowout win here. That's a good win, right, against Central Michigan? Well, Central Michigan's a MAC team. They're like middle of the road at best in the MAC. But if you look at what happened in this game, yeah, I mean, they blew them out on the scoreboard. But Central Michigan outgained them by 60 yards, and FIU was +6 in turnovers in this game. And Central Michigan outpossessed them by 9 minutes, too. So this is a very misleading result. FIU was +6 in turnovers in the game. That's their one win by margin this year. They were +6 in turnovers. I mean, come on, man. So that result is very, very misleading. And then their only other win was by 7. So you're looking at Florida International laying 7 on the road here. They have not won a single road game this year, although granted, their easiest road game was against Florida Atlantic, but they really didn't do well in that game. Florida Atlantic's not that good, and they lost by 18 in that one. So their only 2 wins are both at home, and one is that one where they were +6 in turnovers against CMU, and then the other one was a 7-point win against Louisiana Tech, which was just kind of an ugly game overall. And I don't know if either team necessarily deserved to win this game, to be honest. I mean, this is just a bad game, and they only won that game by 7 and couldn't really put up much against a Louisiana Tech team. How good can Louisiana Tech be? We just saw them lose to New Mexico State last night, and they lost to Tulsa and barely beat Nichols earlier this season. So I don't think Louisiana Tech is very good either, man. So FIU, not impressive. And then they had this other game against Monmouth. They lost to Monmouth, man. And Monmouth, they're an FCS team, and they're not even a really good FCS team. Monmouth, in their FCS slate so far, Monmouth is 2-3. So they're not even a good FCS team. So it's not like they're a powerhouse in the FCS. And FIU, this was not a misleading result. Monmouth outgained them by 65 yards. FIU was -1 in turnovers, but Monmouth outpossessed them by 9 minutes as well. So in some of these FIU games, I mean, they got they lost on the stat sheet there. And FIU, they started this game with an 85-yard pick six. So Monmouth was about to score on them, like on an opening drive, basically, and then FIU took an interception the other way to completely swing the game, basically like a double-digit swing on one play there, and then they still didn't win the game after that. And they were up 21-7, 28-14 in this game. They still didn't win and blew it against Monmouth. And then I think FIU was in field goal range at the end, if I remember correctly, and they were trying to get closer, I guess, or try to win the game with a touchdown, I guess, because they were in range, and they turned it over against Monmouth there, trying to win instead of, at that point, I don't think they had to settle for the field goal yet, so they were trying to win the game, and I believe they turned it over in field goal range there, whereas if they had just been held to a fourth down play there, they would have been able to tie it and send it into overtime. So this FIU team, I don't think they're very good, man. I know UTEP is terrible, but FIU, they're not good, and this is why I'm fading them. This is a sandwich spot, man. Look at their schedule here. I mean, yes, I said UTEP has faced all three of the top teams in this conference. FIU has only faced one of those teams so far, and it was in their most recent game last week against Liberty. This is a big game, man. Liberty's undefeated in conference. They've won a ton of games in a row. They have the nation's longest win streak of 17 straight wins for Liberty. I didn't even know that, but apparently that is the case. So that could have been a huge win for FIU. They were potentially about to end Liberty's long win streak. FIU came back, man. They were down 14 in the fourth quarter, and they made a furious comeback in this game to tie it and send it into overtime, where they eventually lost as a big 15.5-point underdog. Huge game for FIU. Big performance there. They played pretty well in that one. And, man, that's a big game for them. I think they're going to be in a letdown spot off of that, man, or a hangover spot, because that was just such a big game, big performance out of FIU. And then who do they have up next? Sam Houston State, the other team that's atop the conference here besides Western Kentucky. Sam Houston, 5-1 in conference, so FIU has the sandwich in between the two biggest conference games. And you might argue, well, FIU, because they have 2 wins right now, they're still fighting to become like bowl eligible or something like that, right? Like that's maybe a goal of theirs now, sure. But in a spot like this, man, I mean, I just think it's going to be tough. Like, I don't know if you're looking that far ahead and being that focused after you come off a game like that against Liberty where you put in a max effort like that and almost pulled off that big upset. And now you have a second straight road game. And this is also a weird environment, man, because FIU, I don't know if Indiana's in the central time zone or not, but this is the furthest west that they've gone, man. Their other road games, one was still in the state of Florida, and the other was in Liberty, which is in Virginia. So they've mostly stayed on the East Coast. Like their only game that took them west at all was that opening game against Indiana. So now they have to go to El Paso. So this is kind of a tough road spot, too, even though UTEP sucks ass. But all those factors, man, I'm going to take the points with UTEP here. 7 or 7.5, whatever it's going to be. And that's going to do it for my 2 plays today, man. New York Mets in the NLCS, their first 5 innings, -115, keying on that starting pitching matchup between Severino and Buehler. And then college football, awful Conference USA, the worst of the Conference USA matchups. Please help me. UTEP, the winless UTEP team, +7. And as I was saying, I don't even know if UTEP switching back to Locklear or whatever his name is at quarterback. I don't even know if that's necessarily a downgrade because he's kind of the more battle-tested quarterback from those earlier season games where he had to play against Nebraska and whoever I said, that other opponent who was pretty good there. I think it was Liberty, right? Although, I don't know. I mean, their other quarterback, McConnell, did play against Sam Houston and Western Kentucky, I guess. So whatever the case is there. But also remember, last we saw, FIU was putting up a really nice performance, a battle against Liberty in one of these isolated games, and that's the last we saw FIU. They looked pretty good. And the last we saw of UTEP, they looked horrible, and they were getting blown out by Western Kentucky. So I'd like it better if UTEP. I'd like it better if UTEP got blown out by a bad team in their last game, but I still do like it. So thanks, guys, for hanging out. Stacks, let's end this current small slump here. Urjo, the Anaheim Ducks, man. I mean, like I said, there are reasons why I actually kind of like their side tonight, but not getting involved in hockey tonight. So have a good one, guys. Follow me, Tower Gang Toad, on Twitter. Follow the Tower Gang Podcast. We're on tonight. I believe we are indeed on tonight with Owen Benjamin at the regular time, 9:11 p.m. tonight. So come hang out for that tonight. And subscribe to the Patreon, patreon.com/Tower Gang, of course. And you get free bonus content, or not free because you have to pay for it, but you get extra bonus content. It's free once you pay for it. How about that? You get live pre-show, live post-show, and Telegram to hang out with us in, and you get to submit stuff to the mailbag. That's going to do it for me, man. Let's have a good night here. Let's get these wins here, and peace out.